All right, folks. Well, we're going to get started. And if anybody else joins, we'll get them caught up. But my name's Robin. I just wanted to start off by introducing Eastern PA Trans Equity Project, who's hosting the Trans Topic series. We work to empower transgender people in 42 counties in Pennsylvania, work to build community and promote justice. Like I said, we're serving about 60% of Pennsylvania's population, covering all sorts of counties and doing some awesome work. And the Trans Topic series is just part of some of the programs that we run. We run all sorts of different kinds of support and community groups. We do advocacy for systemic change for trans folks. And like I said, Trans Topics workshops are part of our education and awareness. If there's ever a topic you want to see covered, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always looking to make sure we can connect people with resources. And we're super excited that Diacon and April representing Diacon is here tonight to talk about adoption options for trans folks. We also do all sorts of different empowerment programs, things like name change grants, gender affirming clothing, and helping get trans folks' basic needs covered. We serve over 5,000 people every year. I actually think last year was over 6,000. So always growing. And yeah, so super excited that y'all are here tonight. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will let April share hers. And if you type questions in the chat, I'll definitely let April know about them too. But for the rest of the presentation, I'll have myself muted.
All right, well, thank you very much. My name is April Bartholomew. I am the manager of family recruitment and placement through Diacon Adoption and Foster Care. Prior to my role in recruitment, I was a case manager for foster care, so I handled foster care and adoption roles as well. So I feel like any question you can ask about the foster care world, I can probably relate to it and give you some sort of answer. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to grow your family through fostering and adoption. So a little bit about Diacon. Diacon has been working with vulnerable populations such as children and senior living communities for about 150 years. So we have a good reputation with our families. We have very good retention statistics. We work with families for the longevity of their foster care journeys, whether that is just a once and done placement and they feel their family is full and complete and they close, or we have other families that have stayed open with us for multiple placements over the years. So we like to start at the beginning and, end wherever the families feel that they are ready to go. We offer help for all kinds of family dynamics. So we have same-sex couples, single parents, parents that already have birth children, parents who have never had children yet in their home. So we work with all of those families to work with their strengths, learn about their differences, see how we can meet their needs, and we are happy to work with all sorts of families. A little bit about the children we serve. So the children we work with may not be on par with their peers. So they could be developmentally delayed and have significant behaviors from trauma. Some have dental issues, educational needs, mental health challenges, and more. My coworkers and I have never seen just a typical youth with no adverse effects from the losses they have experienced, such as losing siblings, their favorite stuffed animals, pets, etc. Children placed in your home will likely be reacting to these losses in some way or another. We mentioned this to give you a fair expectation of what you may encounter so that you understand the child that comes into your home will likely not be like a birth child. They may need counseling, interventions in school, and other supports to enable their healing and growth. I'm going to mute myself for a second and share Anne's story. She is a foster child, and the video clip that I'm going to share gives you kind of an insight as to what our older youth typically experience when coming into the system.
When I got off the bus after school, I would walk as slowly as I possibly could up my street to my house because I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to go home. I didn't know what it was going to be like. It was a scary thought. I would come home and I would cook dinner for my brothers, and I would make sure that they got up to school in the morning, and it was just all of the normal mom things, while my mom would just run around yelling and screaming at us about how we didn't do something quite the way she wanted it, or just something. She was always yelling about something. And when she did start yelling and screaming and getting angry, she would throw things and she would hit us. There was an incident where she ended up chasing us down the street. So we hid. I had a favorite hiding spot in our basement. It was under the sink. She never found me there. And so when she was really, really angry about something, that's where I would go, and I would stay there until she calmed herself down. The day I got removed, I remember very well. I just went in my room, grabbed some clothes, and we got in the vans and went. I was not aware of so many of the issues that we had just because I didn't know any different. I didn't know that it shouldn't be that way. Foster care for me really pulled me out of that. It really showed me that I am a good person. I should have confidence in myself. I hadn't really had much of a childhood, and the small things like a movie night or like a nice family sit-down dinner. We never had those before. My foster family, every single night we sit down and have dinner together, and some of the best conversations and some of the funniest moments come out of those dinners. They're just great. When I got put into foster care, I saw it as a new change. I saw it as a new start for myself. You can be whoever you want to be, and you can be a better person. Being a good example to other foster kids and showing them that we can succeed. I'm a part of the MYOI Youth Board. We do panels and we talk to different groups. We're a bunch of foster kids that come together to try and fix the foster care system. We try and advocate change and change it from the inside. It's really important for people to remember each case is an actual person. They're not just a case. It's an actual person that they're influencing for the rest of their lives. Everyone that came alongside me through foster care, helped me to see that I can be a more confident person. I should be, and they helped me to be able to do that. They've taught me what it looks like to love someone and what it looks like to be there for them. My foster family has really become my family.
All right. So we have a belief here at Ziacom that there is a child for every family and a family for every child. So there are strengths in all sorts of family dynamics and people who present to be foster parents. Some of the traits that we look for, though, in a foster parent that we've learned leads to successful placement is financial stability, patience, commitment to parent children with difficult behaviors, the ability to manage stress and challenges, communication skills and ability to work as a team, emotional and mental health stability, stable and nurturing home environments, good physical health, parenting support network, schedule flexibility, cultural sensitivity, and realistic expectations. So families can grow in a variety of ways through our programs. Diacon offers these specific programs, but there are also other agencies that will offer some of these or even alternate programs. This is not a comprehensive list of every program available in the state of Pennsylvania, but these are the ones that are most popular. So we do cover foster care. We do have medically fragile foster care placements. We do our foster to adopt program, which is also known as legal risk. We do adoption placements, we do out-of-state placements, and we do have some private infant placements. And I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit more in depth. So foster care encompasses the short-term or long-term care of a child of any age who can no longer remain with their birth family due to a variety of reasons, such as abuse, neglect, lack of supervision, or more. Families are needed to provide these children with the security, nurturance, and guidance that they need until issues at home are corrected and they can return to their birth family. In Pennsylvania, there are about 15,000 youth in foster care at any given time, so resource families are always needed. We have many families interested in adopting young children who are already legally free for adoption, but as we'll discuss later, it's very rare to have a young child who is legally free. However, many young children are adopted by their foster families if their case ends up moving towards adoption. So if you are one of those families interested in caring for young children under 10, the foster care program would be something that would be recommended for you. The current trend we are seeing is for older youth over the age of 12. So why are there not more young children available for adoption? It's because the state of Pennsylvania uses what's called concurrent planning, which means that they work on two permanency plans at the same time. We'll use an example. So Johnny is currently in foster care. In the past, once reunification was no longer a goal for Johnny, they would work on finding him an adoptive home. Now, rather than trying to find an adoptive home after the fact and moving Johnny, only to disrupt all of the relationships he gained at that foster home to move him again, the states come up with what is concurrent planning. So his primary goal is reunification, but at the same time, we're working on a secondary goal of adoption. The state would place Johnny with a family who would hopefully be willing to adopt Johnny if his parental rights were to be terminated. Adoption can only take place once parental rights are terminated in the state of Pennsylvania. The family who says, yes, we are open to caring for Johnny and working towards reunification, but would also love to adopt him if there is a need, would be called a legal risk or a foster to adopt family. This differs from being strictly a foster home that is not open to adoption, and counties often prefer these resource families who are open to adoption if the case gets there. There is risk that comes with the possibility of reunification or kinship caregivers coming forward, which is why it's called legal risk. Another federal law requires agencies to conduct family finding within 30 days of a child's placement in an out-of-home care and annually thereafter. Doesn't mean that a child will be placed with a kinship caregiver if one is identified. However, there are benefits for children being cared for by a kinship resource. Sometimes those connections are strictly just to have connections to a birth family. So it could be a grandmother who stays in that grandparent role even after adoption occurs. It's not always a move. Kinship caregivers in Pennsylvania must meet the same requirements to be approved as a resource parent that is not related to the child. Kinship caregivers can be relatives by blood or marriage or be someone the child has a relationship with, such as a teacher, a coach, a neighbor, etc. So when does parental rights termination start? So say Johnny has been in my home for a while and his parents are not meeting their reunification goals. When would they consider terminating their rights? The Adoption and Safe Families Act provides guidance on when counties should consider terminating parental rights. If a child is in an out-of-home care situation for 15 out of the most recent 22 months, they will consider terminating parental rights. Birth parents are informed of this law when their children are placed in foster care, so they're aware of the court-ordered services they need to complete, and then they have those 15 out of 22 months to complete those goals. Resource parents have no legal rights to the child. Birth parents retain parental rights until terminated by the court, which means they can attend things like medical and dental appointments, school events, etc., unless the court prohibits that from happening. Resource parents are responsible for several things while children are in their homes, such as medical and dental appointments. So medical and dental appointments are something that resource parents will schedule. Birth parents, unless there is a reason not to, will be invited to these appointments. Attending those appointments is a way for those parents to stay up to date on what is happening with their child. And sometimes we do ask that those appointments stay where the child is coming from and not necessarily where you live. Although the majority of the cases, they do allow you to pick your own providers and go somewhere closer to home. We do ask that you attend and transport to court hearings, minimum of twice a year, but more likely to be a little bit more frequent, especially if it's early on in the case. There are a lot of differences between counties, so it's hard to say what this would look like for every case. At these hearings, the birth parent's progress and compliance with those reunification services is reviewed and case plans are modified if needed, meaning if they're not making Progress, that's the time that we start talking about whether they're going to move towards termination of parental rights and adoption would become an option. Some children coming into your home may have visitation depending on where their case is, meaning that their parental rights are still intact and birth parents are still actively involved with their case. So we might ask for help transporting to those visits. Sometimes they're with birth parents, sometimes they're with siblings, sometimes they're with other relatives who have come forward. Frequency and duration are court ordered. We have found typically the younger the child, the more frequent and shorter the visits. So, for example, if you have an infant in your home, you can expect maybe 3-hour-long visits, where if you have a 13 or, older youth in your home, they may only see their parents once a week for those 3 hours because they're not creating that bonding infant relationship at that time. They are able to understand the longer stretches between those visits. Legal risk placements are by far our most frequent placements. We do have some emergency placements as well. So that is meaning that the child is looking for a place within the next 24 hours. A lot of times by the end of that day, they're asking for a family that is willing to accept them. There are also things called planned placements, and we'll talk a little bit more about those placements later on, where it's not an emergency. The child has time to be moved, and families then have the chance to interview with the county, learn more about the child by reading their child profile, sometimes have pre-placement visits that would increase in frequency. So they get to know the child before the child is moving into their home. Daily reimbursement to cover expenses for caring for a child through the foster care system is provided to the families. The amount depends on the county and the agency that you are with, if you are with an agency. Every child who is placed in the state of Pennsylvania in foster care does get state health insurance, so that is never a concern for foster parents to have to pay out of their pocket. Children are also eligible for a child care subsidy while they are in the foster care system. So that means that as long as you are working a minimum of 20 hours per week for both resource parents, there will be help to provide childcare, whether that's before care, after care, daycare, summer care, anything like that. We can talk more about this later, but I'm just going to touch on referrals really quick. We do call when we have a placement that fits a family. So if you were to be a licensed foster home, you would let us know what you're looking for in a placement. And then when the county says we have this child who needs a home, then we would call you and let you know what that looks like. But I can touch more on that as we get into what placements look like. For these programs, the state of Pennsylvania has the statewide adoption network, or the SWAN network. A lot of this is subsidized by that SWAN network. So a lot of times, except for the cost of clearances and maybe a medical exam, the foster care and legal risk placements are free to families. It doesn't cost you anything to start up. You don't have to pay for your family profile. So it is one of the benefits of coming through the legal risk system. Just gonna see, are there any questions yet that we need to answer? Nope, not seeing any. Okay. Medically fragile foster care is another program that is offered. These children are typically released right from or referred right from a hospital setting or a nursing home or a transitional placement. There are varying degrees of medical needs. To be qualified as a medically fragile foster home, you would have to complete additional training such as CPR and first aid. And then the daily compensation rate is higher for medically fragile children because they have more frequent appointments and levels of care. Not every agency does medically fragile foster care, but it is something that you'll see when you start examining what the foster care system looks like. Some of the children are legally free for adoption, but not always. These are the children that are usually placed through the SWAN adoption network. Some counties wait until an adoptive resource is identified before terminating parental rights because they don't like to make kids legal orphans. Any child on the www.adoptpakids.org website that are not legally free for adoption will be listed under an alias. A lot of times those children that are not legally free for adoption yet will have pictures that don't show their face. So they'll be blurred, or you'll see the back of their heads, or it'll be a cartoon character. Those are the kiddos who they will start termination of parental rights when they find an adoptive resource. The ones that you can usually see clearly are the ones that are already legally free for adoption and are just waiting for that family to present for them, and the adoption process can start. To be eligible for this program and to have SWAN pay for all of the expenses, you'll need to be open to either sibling groups, children over the age of 10, or children and youth with medical, physical, cognitive, or emotional challenges. So again, if you're open to, let's say, medically fragile placements, they would fall under this. Patience with this program is a necessity. So it happens with matching. Workers and families can be looking for children that they are interested in learning more about simultaneously through that website. Interviews will be scheduled to learn more about those children. Pre-placement visits of increasing length and frequency happen before a child moves into your home. There is some frustration from a lot of families with this system because there can be some slow callbacks and updates due to the volume of inquiries that the workers who are recruiting for these children are facing, especially if it includes a younger child in the system. Child must be in your home for a minimum of 6 months before an adoption can be finalized, and it may take longer than 6 months to work on problems and issues. So it's not a requirement to start the adoption process or finish it within those 6 months. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer. The risk with SWAN is lesser than foster care and legal risk, but if a child is not yet legally free for adoption, birth parent reunification or kinship placement is still a possibility. Family finding can continue unless ordered by a judge. The judge can reorder that a search be completed to identify kinship resources, even if rights have already been terminated. Out-of-state placements are not covered by the SWAN network, so fees vary state by state, and most states do not have a program like SWAN that connects those affiliate agencies and county agencies to make matches. So our out-of-state placements do come with a cost to the family of the family profile, and then also social service fees for placement in the home. The placement of children from out of state requires additional steps and requirements and can be a very lengthy process. So out of state placements do take longer than children coming to your home from the state of Pennsylvania. Similar to those SWAN placements, though, the children need to be placed in your home for a minimum of 6 months prior to adoption happening. And if you're interested to see what children are available across the United States, the website for that is adoptuskids.org.
I did have a question on that. Can I ask one?
Absolutely.
I was curious why might people decide to try to adopt outside of the state when there are kids in the state? I'm just curious what people's usual reasons might be for that.
So I'm being honest with you. In my experience with working with families, it happens to be just out of coincidence that a family will see a child or a sibling group who they connect with online, and it just happens to be out of state. There have been some families who are looking for a very particular child or sibling group, and they can't find it in the state of Pennsylvania, or maybe the placement just didn't happen for them, and they start to look out of state. There are some benefits to looking out of state because it does widen the children that you're looking at, but also it does take more time. It can be tricky to get the courts to move out of state if there is a chance for a placement in state. So there are some tricks to that, but really it's a family choice. For the matching process, we only look inside the state of Pennsylvania. So if a family is interested in out-of-state placement, they are usually looking on their own for those. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you for explaining that.
Absolutely. So private infant is another option for families who are looking to expand their family. For Diacon in particular, we have an average of 1 to 2 placements per year, but we've had as many as 4 in a year, and it varies based on the number of birth mothers calling us for counseling and asking for assistance in making an adoption plan. The waitlist varies depending on the number of mothers contacting us, and generally for Diacon specifically, we limit how many families are on that list to no more than 10. Birth parents have a lot more involvement in the private infant placements. So birth parents review resumes that are written by the foster families, and they select a family or two to meet and interview. They are able to make those decisions where the courts are involved on the foster care side more. Birth parents have a lot more say in where their children go, have a lot more involvement in the process. If the birth father is unknown, and he finds out that this happens, because they do have to reach out and let him know if they can identify, he can present as a resource. So there is that risk to the private infant program. Costs for this program are considerably higher because you are paying for the family profile fee, there's social service fees, you're paying for fees for service. So if birth parents don't necessarily have medical insurance, that is coming out of the family's pockets. And then there's also the cost of the actual adoption itself. So terminating parental rights, filing for adoption, getting a lawyer, all of those things, where on the foster care side, those are subsidized by the counties and the statewide adoption network. So if you're interested in becoming a foster family, there is a process that most agencies and counties go through. So first is training, and more training. So every foster parent in the state of Pennsylvania needs to complete training hours. These can vary agency to agency and county to county, but there are some mandated trainings such as mandated reporter training, reasonable and prudent parent training, human trafficking, that all resource parents must take before they can be licensed. Is also a state requirement that all of the clearances are obtained. So those are FBI fingerprints, state police checks, and child abuse checks for everyone that in the home who is 18 or older. Those must be completed, whether they are going to be parenting or not. There is always paperwork included. So paperwork packets, foster care handbooks, and resource materials are distributed to families coming through. Families are interviewed, so there's always an initial interview, and then depending on how far that gets or the circumstances of the family, there can be subsequent interviews as needed. The home study is generally completed within 6 to 9 months after training is completed, but that is also in the hands of the resource families. So if resource families are on top of things and handing things in quickly, we can turn around and complete this much faster. If you're interested in that matching process, matching cannot begin until you review and sign your family profile document. And again, the pace of the process is in your hands. The quicker we get stuff, the quicker we can move forward with everything. So moving into what happens after you are approved. So your family profile is written, you review it, let us know if you agree with everything in there. If not, we make some changes. If you do agree, we have you sign it and you are officially a licensed foster home. After that occurs, you are registered on the Pennsylvania Adoption Exchange for matching purposes and open to the state of Pennsylvania as a licensed foster home. We then place you on the waiting families list. So the waiting families list is a comprehensive list of all of the licensed families that an agency has that are looking currently for placements. So it lets us know who you are, what child you are interested in, where you live, the school district you're in. So when we get a referral from the counties, we can look at that waiting families list and know if that particular child referral matches your family. And if it does, we'll give you a call. And if it doesn't, we'll just move on to the next one. Families can be placed in different categories, such as strictly foster care homes. Some of our homes are respite only, so they only do short-term planned placements. Some of our families are legal risk, some are SWAN, some are open to emergency, some aren't. So anything that you are open to or not open to, if you're a family that can't take emergency placements, we are also writing that on that waiting families list so we know exactly what we're calling you for. So once you're on our waiting families list, what happens next? For foster care, referrals are received from the county. If it matches on that waiting families list, the family is contacted by a placement coordinator. Those conversations should be easy as if talking to a friend. So we are giving you what we were given by the county. You're asking us questions. You're letting us know whether you feel this is a good fit or not. And those conversations are happening as if they were just natural, like everyday conversations. County's role in all of this is that they take legal and physical custody of the child. So we submit your family profile to the counties, and then they decide whether or not they would like to place with your family. Sometimes we only submit one family. Sometimes we have multiple families to submit. So the county's role, because they have that legal custody, is to look over all of the profiles and feel like they have a say and who they feel would be the best match for that child. We'll tell you about the children. So the counties give us all the information they have and we pass it along to you. We tell you things like when visitation is, if there's any behaviors, what grades they're in, if they have IEPs. It is difficult with certain types of placements. So emergency placements, we do tend to not know as much about the children, where children who have been in the system, we obviously will know more about. So we can pass along everything we know. If you have particular questions, so let's say you're a home that has pets and you want to make sure that the child is okay with pets, let us know, and we can always go back to the county and say, do you happen to know how they are with pets? Is there any concern about them being placed with younger children in the home? Those types of questions. The time frame looks different depending on what type of placement it is. Typically, we don't know how long placements will last, except for maybe in a respite situation. So that's difficult to tell the families, but what placement looks like, we can kind of take a guess. Emergency placements are typically by the end of that day, if not within the next 24 to 48 hours. Legal risk placements can be emergency, or they can also be planned. So there may be some time in there to interview or meet the child or take some time to plan out placement a little bit more. Foster care placement can be the same, either emergency or planned. The SWAN placements do happen to take a little bit longer, and we'll talk about that on the next slide too. Some questions to consider when we're calling you with a referral are going to be things that really matter to your family. If you need to know how many times a week visitation is, make sure you're asking those. If you have pets in the home, make sure you're asking about pets. If you have other children in the home, make sure that the child is able to be placed with other children. Anything that would make a difference to your family was whether or not you can say yes to that placement. We want you to let us know and ask those questions. Then we'll ask you to make a decision. So we've given you all of that information that we have, and then it's your turn to tell us whether you would like to be submitted for that placement and potentially be a resource for that child or children or not. So when you say yes, we do send your family profile to the counties and they review it and let us know if they are interested in placing with your family. If it is a no, we thank you for your time and for listening. We will ask why you said no, just so we can make a note of it and make sure that our listing is matching what our waiting families is saying and what you're open to. And then we'll call you with the next one. We need all the resource families we can get. And if a placement is not right for you, we want to know that up front. We'd rather you say no, and then we will call you with the next referral that we think fits your home. For SWAN placements are usually not emergency placements. Children are generally legally free for adoption or in the final stages of termination of parental rights. So those are those children that are on the adoptpakids.org. Placements can occur through referrals, just as we were just talking. So maybe there's a child who is legally free for adoption that cannot stay where they are anymore. So you may get a phone call saying, we have this child and it seems it might fit in your home, or it could be through the matching process. The matching process is done through SWAN. That is when you see one of the children on the website, you inquire about them and you're interested in learning more. They provide the opportunity to learn more about the child, read their child profile, interview with the counties, have some pre-placement visits to get to know the child and see if they fit into your home and your lifestyle. Families can get phone calls from placement coordinators and or their recruiters. It really depends on how the referral comes through. And then upon SWAN placement, the family is transferred away from their family development specialist to a foster care or adoption case manager, depending on where they are in the process. So if rights are terminated and adoption is imminent, they'll go to the adoption case managers. If it is still in the foster care stages and parental rights are still intact, they may go to a foster care worker until that occurs. So accepting a placement, so you say yes, we submit your profile, and the county comes back and says, yes, we'd love to place with this family. So depending on the timing of the placement, that child is going to enter your home. The child is grieving the loss of their family. They're coming into your home and they're not sure what to expect. So we always ask families to, although you may be excited that this child is entering your home, to understand that they may be grieving at the same time. We ask that you be prepared. So if you are open for a very strict age group, so let's say you're open for ages 2 to 5, you know that you're going to need a toddler bed or a crib, and you can kind of guess your clothing sizes and have things ready. But if you're open to like 0 to 14, that may not be possible, because you may need a crib, you may need a twin size bed, you may need more. So always have a plan if you cannot have all of the stuff readily available for you, that you have a way to run out and get those things. Maybe you stay home and a friend runs for you, or vice versa. Maybe you stay home and your partner runs out for items. Just make sure that you have a plan. Also have a support plan. Have people that you can call and talk to when things get difficult. This is not an easy system to navigate, and although at the end of it, it is so worth it, you do need to have a support plan just so you have those supports in place, whether that's family, friends, other foster parents, your workers. If you ever feel like you can use more support, ask your workers. They can probably hook you up with a support group or another family that has done this for a while to kind of partner and have someone just to bounce ideas off of. Expect the grief and loss, which I already mentioned, and then expect the unexpected. As much as we can tell you everything that we know about this child, there are things that we may not know, especially when we get to the older children who don't necessarily share everything about themselves. So we may tell you that, they are good with animals, but perhaps they've never been placed with animals, and then they're in your home and they're scared of your pet. So there's like little things like that we don't necessarily always know ahead of time. So just being open and understanding that we've told you everything we can, but there are things that can go on that we weren't expecting, will set you up for success. Please remember to have patience, both with the children that are coming into your home, the caseworkers that are trying to scramble and figure everything out, and yourselves, because every placement is different, every family is different, and you need to have patience with yourself as well. There are a lot of people involved in the foster care system. So you have legal teams for both the counties, the child, and the birth parents. The county is involved in all of those placements because they have legal custody. There's a birth family team, which can include, if the birth parents are involved, like a reunification specialist or treatment people on their end. For Diacon placements, we are in there. So if you have a foster care agency, you're going to see your Diacon representatives in and out of your home to make sure that everything is going well month to month. Child may have services. So you may have early intervention, meaning like speech therapy or physical therapy coming into your home. You may have behavioral therapists or trauma therapists that are coming in and out or involved in the case. You may have an educational team depending on the age of the child and whether they have a 504 or an IEP. You are, of course, involved in that case as the resource family offering that child a home. And then there's sometimes some extra support. So like a family support specialist or someone else that is there to help support, train, offer guidance in your cases. Remember that we are here, all of your caseworkers, regardless of whether they are from the county or an agency, to help to communicate and collaborate and help make this placement as successful as possible. So lean on them, let them know what's going on. If there is a problem, let us know as soon as possible, because then we can help. So for emergencies and other things to remember, just a general rule for foster care, utilize on-call after hours. Whether you're through an agency or a county, every agency is required to have an on-call number in case emergencies. So ER trips, a child decides not to come home one night, there's issues with behaviors, those types of things, make sure you're utilizing that on-call. Children are not allowed to be posted on social media websites, although older kiddos may have their own social media. It's unavoidable if they are old enough to do that. You are not allowed to post on social media website. And then maintain confidentiality and HIPAA. Although you can have supports people in your lives that know what is going on and that you are fostering a child, just remember that this is that child's story and you may not want to share everything about them and put it out there. It's their story to share and their story to feel comfortable with others knowing. Part of having a placement in your home is the home visit process. So depending on the needs of the child, there could be different amounts of contact per month. So for traditional placements, it's usually once a month. Specialized, meaning the child needs more care, whether that's more appointments, more visits, just a higher level of attention. Those might be twice a month. And then for medical or treatment placements, we can expect to see you 2 to 3 times a month, depending on what is going on at the time. During those home visits, we're going to ask questions. We're going to gather documentation, so incident reports. If they've recently been to the doctor or the dentist, we're going to ask for reports from those visits. We're going to ask for things that may have expired. So we're required to keep certain documents on file for foster families, such as car insurance and homeowners insurance and pet vaccines. So if those are recently expired, we may ask for updates. All children in the foster care system have permanency plans, so we'll review those at home visits and obtain signatures. And then things like report cards or if they had early intervention or an evaluation or stuff, we'll collect those too. Some agencies do have intake workers, so a worker that has that case in the initial stages, but may not keep them throughout the longevity of the case. So there may be someone that starts with you, but doesn't necessarily go on. So when those case transfers occur, usually Diacon tries to make sure that the new worker and the worker that currently has the case go out together, so it's a smooth handoff, but that's not always a possibility. Those home visits are attended by various people depending on the county. Some counties go out every month. Some counties rely on an agency to go out every month. So it's very county and case specific. But people who can come to your home are county workers, CASA workers who are court appointed special advocates. If there are additional providers, they can come out. Sometimes the county or your agencies have interns who come out. The guardian ad litem, who is assigned to every child in the system to help them make decisions in their best interest, can come out to your home or also give you a phone call. And then we also have family support specialists or those extra support people that may come out to a home visit. So some of the important things to keep in mind for foster care or legal risk placements is that reunification, if it is a goal, is something that needs to be kept in mind. So most children that are just entering the foster care system present with a goal of reunification unless otherwise specified. So some of those kiddos that are on the adoptpakids.org website will already have a goal of adoption and not reunification because they have been in the system and gone through the steps and everything. But by far, if you are taking in a legal risk or foster care placement that has not been in for a while, reunification is going to be that primary goal. Counties engage in what we talked about, concurrent planning, meaning they are working on that secondary goal of adoption, and SPLIC, which is an alternative to adoption that we'll talk about in a few minutes. We are legally obligated to pursue efforts to achieve reunification. So if reunification is that goal on that court order, the county and agencies need to be working towards that goal until it is no longer that goal. Make sure throughout this process you are conscientious of your own feelings and viewpoints. So this system is not the easiest, so make sure that you are talking to someone about how you feel and how this is affecting you. If you need help connecting to people, your caseworkers can always connect you to those who can help, and we can match you up with families or supports or support groups that can help. Your workers are going to talk about reunification from the start of your case and continue to talk about it until a goal change occurs. So that means that all of the things that we do is going to be aimed at that reunification piece of the order until it is not. When your case gets to adoption, everything will flip over to that secondary goal, and then everything we do starts to be for that new goal of adoption. And then permanency, which is the goal for many families that come through this system. When reunification is no longer a possibility for many children, adoption or SPLC, which is subsidized permanent legal custodianship, is the option for a permanent solution. What is the process for adoption? So it starts with termination of parental rights. It's held over several court hearings, depending on, sometimes parents will voluntarily relinquish their rights. Sometimes they will take it to court and fight for their rights. It really depends on the case. Once termination of parental rights occurs, they have a 30-day time period to appeal. And after that 30 days, if no appeal has been processed, the child is considered legally free, and that adoption finalization period can start. In the state of Pennsylvania, that finalization period is a minimum of 3 home visits, plus a whole lot of paperwork on our ends to prepare for filing at the courts. You'll have a disclosure with the county where they give you all of the information that they have on that child. So sometimes it's a lot of information, sometimes it's not a lot of information, but if they have things like birth records, if they have report cards over the years, if they have reports that were written or evaluations that were had, all of that will be given to the family to prepare for adoption and to, offer them all the information they have before they go through with adoption. You can, in the state of Pennsylvania, go ask for subsidy. A lot of the counties do provide ongoing subsidy following adoption. So that means that until the child turns 18, sometimes 21 if they are older when they are adopted, subsidy will continue and families will be able to use that to help support the child in their home, whether that's using it to pay for daily items or putting it away for bigger things like car purchases or college. And then once all of that is done, we send all of that information to an attorney and adoption day happens. For most children through the foster care and legal risk system, the adoption process is almost completely covered by the counties or through SWAN. So nothing is out of pocket for you except for maybe clearances in that medical. Once again, just make sure everything is okay. The adoption subsidy typically decreases dependent upon the needs of that child. So the county determines that ongoing rate. So if you ask for a subsidy to be given to you, it is up to the county what that looks like. And you can go back and forth and sort of negotiate those rates if you feel that the child has more needs or you need more subsidy to be able to meet their needs in the home. We also cover the Act 101 and post-adoption contact agreements. So in the state of Pennsylvania, there is an Act 101 law that states that families and birth families can enter into an agreement stating that they will continue contact after adoption. It is not required that you enter into these agreements, but it is required that you are notified of them and you sign that you acknowledge that they exist. If it is something that you want to pursue, there is a third agency that is usually involved in negotiating that contact agreement. And both the birth family, the child, and the resource families have to agree on what it is in those things if the child's old enough to be involved. For children who do not wish to be adopted or when termination of parental rights is not possible to happen, but yet reunification can't occur, subsidized permanent legal custodianship can be an alternative to adoption. It is a court order granting custodianship. So for all intents and purposes, that court order grants you everything that adoption would grant you, meaning medical rights, educational rights, all of the decision-making power for the child in your home. The only difference is that parental rights stay intact, so the child's name does not change at adoption. Rights over the child are given to a guardian, so you can make all of the decisions that you couldn't make before for that child. Birth parents do not have to be consulted over anything. You have the ability to make those decisions. After adoption occurs, the child is registered for the Pennsylvania Adoption Information Registry. So the family decides whether to close their home to placements or stay open for additional placements. SWAN offers post-permanency services, so any child who has been adopted or achieves SPLC through Pennsylvania does qualify for post-permanency services. The family can call or email to request those services, and they can help with respite care, case advocacy, support groups, basically case management skills to help you navigate if you're suddenly having issues with behaviors or difficulty getting services. You will be told at the time of adoption how to access this, but just for your knowledge, you can either email Swan Helpline at diaconswan.org, or there is a phone number that you can call to access these post-pregnancy services. So I see there is a question. So how does the say of the kids come into play? Are they able to decide not to stay with a family? That's a very good question. And the answer is really, it depends on the age of the child. So a lot of times their opinions are taken into consideration. In the state of Pennsylvania, a child who is 11 years or older needs to consent to their own adoption. So if they are not willing to consent, that is when that split option may become more prevalent. So they may turn around and say, I don't wish to be adopted. I don't want my parents' rights to be terminated. And then we'll explore other options. If a child's experiencing difficulty within a home and, they let the case managers know or the caseworkers know, we do work with them to find out why, if we can fix it, if it's something that needs to be moved. So children really do have a say in where they end up. Of course, the little ones, it's difficult to talk to them and get their consent for things, but a lot of times it is about the child gets to weigh in on what happens with their adoption. All right, before I end with some time for questions, I just wanted to share some success stories and inspiration from some of our families who have adopted over the last couple years. So this particular family wanted to foster to make a difference in a child's life. We wanted to show them what family is and a sense of belonging. A lot of people are scared to make the commitment to foster. There are so many children in need of homes. I wish more people would give it a chance. These children are so worth it. Another family who adopted a teen out of the Matching and Swan program says adopting Gage has been the best thing we have ever done. Our biological kids were grown and our house felt empty. He brings so much energy and joy to our family. I would encourage everyone to consider the teens waiting for families. This family adopted a sibling group of 3, and she shared that I always knew this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to give someone the childhood I wanted. I wanted them to have an amazing life with the opportunity to be able to achieve and set any goal. This family adopted a sibling group of 2 and shared that when we wanted to grow our family, we knew there were children in need. I've seen a quote many times saying, if someone showed up at your door with a child in need, what would you do? Chances are you would help. Well, that's foster care. You just have to sign up and be that person. Every child needs someone supporting them. And then one more family, they adopted the 2 children in the photo separately. So we yearned to share our home and hearts with a child, and in a twist of fate, we were blessed with a 4-day-old baby boy. 2 years later, we met our little girl, just 4 days older than our son. Our twins have filled our lives with double the joy and double the love for the last 3 years. Birthdays have become week-long celebrations in our home, and we wouldn't have it any other way. If you have room at your table, invite a child in. There is no such thing as too much love. So although I could go on for a long time about all of the families that we have helped to complete, that is all of the ones I have for today to share. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
We have one in the chat. So they're asking, does LGBTQ plus identity impact what kids are referred to a family for foster care or adoption?
So if a youth coming in, if I understand the question correctly, you're asking about children and youth who are part of the LGBTQ community coming in, right? I'm assuming that's what you mean. We try to match families with the children who are coming through the system. So we have families who are open to LGBTQ youth. We have families that are not open to LGBTQ youth. So we try to pair them with families that will be open to their specific needs. If a family is comfortable parenting, that's one of the things we talk about. Of course, the tricky part to this is some of our youth are not very open to being part of that community at first. They don't want everyone to know, or they don't feel comfortable sharing. So we find out somewhere along the way, and majority of our families have been open to growing with that youth and talking about these things and accepting. and then moving forward with permanency options. We've never had a family turn around and say no or, ask for that child to be removed because of that. But if we are aware, we are matching with families. We're talking about that during training. We're talking about that during your interviews, what they're open to and comfortable with parenting. And then we move from there. These children also need homes, they need families, they need somewhere to go for the holidays. So we try our best to train families, open their minds, open their hearts, see what they are comfortable with, and then move forward from there.
It seems like you did answer the question. The person says that they're asking, like, since they are a trans person, like if that impacts placement of kids. And it seems like you touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, it would really be whether or not that particular family is open to that. So
Mhm.
during part of the interviewing process, we are talking about what they're open to, in the grand scheme of things. So if they're comfortable with parenting a child who is trans or part of the LGBTQ community, we're talking about what that means and opening them up for placements that identify as part of that community.
I had another question that I just thought about. It's not something that's pertinent to me, but something that sometimes comes up. How does it impact people's like eligibility for being foster parents if you're like not a married couple, but like a group of people who live together and are like, I don't know, committed to each other in some way? I just know that that's really common in the queer community. And so I was curious how that might factor into stuff. Or do you ever have adoptions or foster care by like a single person as well?
So we have had adoptions by, I think, every sort of family dynamic you can imagine. So we've had married couples, we've had couples who are cohabitating but are not married who have adopted. We have families who maybe they are married or cohabitating, but only one of them wants to move forward with adoption. We've had single parents. So it really is working with every individual family's dynamics, finding where the strengths are, what the comfortability is with all of the people involved. But the short answer is yes, people do not necessarily have to be married to adopt in the state of Pennsylvania. We are able to work with what the family would like, and we can move forward either with both of them, one of them. Our family profiles work to show the strengths in the home. So you don't necessarily have to be married to be able to parent together, to have a very loving, open, warm, safe home. So those things, although we write about them in the profile because they're important to the family themselves, it's not a hindering factor in approval or moving forward with adoption.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for answering that.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions?
Looks like the chat is saying thank you for presentation.
My pleasure. Should anybody come up with questions after the fact, feel free to share my contact information. I'd love to answer them.
Yeah, please feel free. You can reach out to us at Eastern PA, and we're happy to connect you with April and the folks at Diacon to help talk you through whatever other parts of the process, or if you want to get started onto the adoption process. I'm sure that they can help you pretty well. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, April, for taking the time to educate us on all these topics. I'm
You're
really
very
grateful for
welcome.
your time and for the work that you do at Diacon. So yeah, really grateful. And hope people will follow up and connect with you. So I
Thank
hope
you.
that everybody has a really lovely night. Um, and yeah, that is all, folks.